The last chapter, chapter 18. The chapter begins with this question from Arjuna. I wish to learn, O great armed one, the nature of abstaining from action and of giving up the results of action, and also the difference between these two. The whole of the chapter is devoted to the answer. Not only are the nature of abstaining from action and the giving up of the results of action involved in the reply, but an understanding of the very nature of action itself and the causes and basis of action. Relating to the agents of action, Krishna says, Learn, O great armed one, that for the accomplishment of every work 5 agents are necessary and is declared. These are the substratum, the agent, the various sorts of organs, the various and distinct movements, and with these, as 5th, the presiding deities. These 5 agents are included in the performance of every act which a man undertaketh, whether with his body, his speech, or his mind. Again, that whoever, because of the imperfection of his mind, beholdeth the real self as the agent, thinketh wrongly and seeth not aright. It is thus evident that it is not the real self that acts, a statement that has been reiterated throughout the previous chapters, and one that it is necessary to understand before the nature of action is comprehended. Prakriti, or nature, is the cause of all action throughout the universe, as it is the basis by which action may take place. This is true on every place of being. In the 13th chapter are these words, Know that Prakriti, or nature, and Purusha, the spirit, are without beginning, and know that the passions and the 3 qualities are sprung from nature. Nature, or Prakriti, is said to be that which operates in producing cause and effect in actions. Individual spirit, or Purusha, is said to be the cause of experiencing pain and pleasure. For spirit, when invested with matter, or Prakriti, experienceth the qualities which proceed from Prakriti. This passage throws some light on the meaning of the substratum. It is substance in its primordial state from which all differentiations proceed, and within which all differentiations are contained, and therefore forms the basic agent of all action. The word agent in the classification may be understood as the power which prompts to action. For instance, the personal self with its concrete and limited ideas impels the organs of the body and the necessary movements to carry out the prevailing idea. The 5th agent is called the presiding deities. This latter term may be explained in this way. Our bodies are composed of small lives of many different kinds, each of those kinds acting only in response to particular impulses. Each class acts according to its own nature, and as a class constitutes a hierarchy of being, devas or deities. It is understood, of course, that from which all power to perceive or to cause action emanates is the self of all. That power becomes particularized, so to speak, in the individual self, who on higher planes is the impeller of actions on those planes. On the physical plane, the personal self is but a temporary aspect of the individual self, this aspect being sometimes called the false ego because of its delusion. It is this personal self which consciously or unconsciously to itself impels the lives in his bodily organs to action. Now we may understand better this passage from the 5th chapter. The devotee who knows the divine truth thinketh, I am doing nothing in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, even when speaking, letting go or talking, opening or closing his eyes, he saith, the senses and organs move by natural impulse to their appropriate objects. It has been said that the self neither acts nor is acted upon. This must be true also of the personal self, for as the 13th chapter says, the spirit in the body is called Maheshvara, the great Lord, the spectator and admonisher, the sustainer, the enjoyer, and also the Paramatma, the highest soul. The self or spirit in the body is deluded by the three qualities perceived in nature, liked or disliked, and identifies itself with the actions it induces. He who seeth that all his actions are performed by nature only, and that the self within is not the actor, sees indeed. There is also this passage, the path of action is obscure. The man who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. If we reconstruct our ideas in regard to action as above indicated, it will throw a new light on karmic responsibility, connecting us more intimately with all selves, all lives, small and great, and assist us to a better realization of acting for and as the self. Having determined, to some extent at least, the nature of action, we have aroused to that extent what Krishna calls the discerning power, which is also called buddhi, direct cognition, the highest intellection, the power of judgment, according to its various degrees of activity. These degrees flow from attraction to one or other of the three qualities found in nature, and are described as follows. The discerning power that knows how to begin and to renounce, what should and what should not be done, what is to be feared and what not, what holds fast and what sets the soul free, is of the sattva quality. That discernment, O son of Prita, which does not fully know what ought to be done and what not, what should be feared and what not, is of the passion-born rajas quality. The discriminating power, which is enveloped in obscurity, mistaking wrong for right and all things contrary to their true intent and meaning, is of the dark quality of tamas. With the discerning power there must also be the power of steadfastness, for unless we are constant in devotion to the higher life and the ideal of a conscious life in spirit, not matter, we will be recreant to the best we know. Having reached the power of discernment, and having been shown the path which to us is peculiarly ours, we should set aside all other considerations that tend to draw us from it. We should cultivate and practice that power of steadfastness, holding the man together, which by devotion controls every motion of the mind, the breath, the senses, and the organs. This, as the chapter says, partaketh of the sattva quality, that is, the whole instrument is used for the best and highest purpose only. The power of steadfastness may exist without the highest power of discernment, as in the one who, looking for the fruits of action, cherishes duty, pleasure, and wealth from the point of view of desire or rajas, or in the man of low capacity who stays fast in drowsiness, fear, grief, vanity, and rashness, bound by the tamasic quality. If we have determined for ourselves the nature of action, the goal of true discernment and steadfastness, which is harmony of thought, will, and feeling, as well as an action on the lines of our determination, we can only have done so through something of that wisdom which perceives in all nature one single principle, indivisible and incorruptible, not separate in the separate objects seen, and which is of the sattva quality. It is the changeless self within, which, if we follow the lines of our determination, we will come to realize more and more. There can be no realization of self in that kind of knowledge which perceives different and manifold principles as present in the world of created beings, or in that knowledge wholly without value, which is mean, attached to one object alone as if it were the whole, which does not see the true cause of existence. All our thoughts give rise to action among the lives which compose our astrophysical instrument, and as we never cease thinking, action continually goes on, for, as often said, thought is the real plane of action. Even though we may not contemplate any immediate bodily act, we may by our thoughts accumulate a tendency in the lives of our instrument, which will eventually result in outward action whenever favoring conditions permit, and we will fall victims to our lack of discernment and steadfastness, as well as involve others in our fate. Now here what are the three kinds of pleasure wherein happiness comes from habitude and pain is ended. We may get some understanding of this sentence if we consider that when some ardently desired aim or object is sought and found, there is at first happiness, and the pain of non-attainment is ended. But the happiness does not remain the same. It resolves itself into contentment and habitude, until the latter becomes wearisome, and another aim or object is sought. That which in the beginning is as poison, and in the end as the water of life, and which arises from a purified understanding, is declared to be of the sattva quality. The pursuit of desires brings a beginning of sweetness and an ending of bitterness. The pleasure gained from idleness, carelessness, and indifference stupefies the soul. To arouse oneself from desiring or from carelessness and indifference is at first as poison, but with a purified understanding becomes the water of life. The statement that there is no creature on earth nor among the hosts of heaven who is free from these three qualities which arise from nature points to the fact that the three qualities exist on every plane of being. The hard and fast hereditary castes of India of the present day are not meant by the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras of this chapter. In earlier days, before the ancient teaching had become materialized, marriage was a sacred and religious contract. Family life was so understood and conducted as to provide proper environment for egos of the same nature as the family on spiritual, psychical, and other lines. Then there existed natural castes, where all lines of heredity conjoined. In these degenerate days, the castes are mixed, and there are those born in castes whose nature does not conform to the original caste, whose name and privileges they take and abuse. Nevertheless, the castes exist everywhere, but no longer does social position or physical environment distinguish them. In all countries at the present time, there are those in high place and power who by nature are Sudras, and many who are Brahmins by nature are lower in our social scale, for this is Kali Yuga, when the powers of darkness are in the ascendancy. The ancient castes performed duties which were the outcome of their several natures, and were so recognized by all. There was no pride of caste, nor jealousy, and there existed an ideal community of mutual helpfulness. Hence the duties of the castes were determined by the qualities which predominated in each. Men being contented and devoted to their own proper duties, that for which their nature fits them, attain perfection. If, in all that he does, a man maketh offering to the Supreme Being, who is the source of the works of all, and by whom this universe was spread abroad, he thus obtaineth perfection. The performance of the duties of a man's own particular calling, although devoid of excellence, is better than doing the duty of another, however well performed, and he who fulfills the duties obligated by nature does not incur sin. A man's own natural duty, even though stained with faults, ought not to be abandoned. The highest perfection of freedom from action is attained through renunciation by him who has an unfettered mind and subdued heart. Dharma is the word which in our language is translated as duty, but it has a much wider range and meaning than that which we accord to the word duty. There are many who think that duty is something that others think we should do. Others again consider duty to be irksome, and as actions to be performed under duress, and therefore to be avoided. It is therefore necessary to grasp the meaning of the word duty as used in the Gita. Dharma means the sacred law, the fulfillment of our karmic destiny through many incarnations, the working out and elimination of defects which have brought us into earth life under the conditions in which we find ourselves, which conditions we should feel and know to be the very opportunities needed for our further progress. This is why one of the great teachers wrote, "Duty is the royal talisman. Duty alone will lead us to the goal." Krishna enumerates the attainments by which a man is fitted to be the Supreme Being, and having thus attained to the Supreme, he is serene, sorrowing no more, and no more desiring, but alike towards all creatures he attains to supreme devotion to me. By this devotion to me he knoweth fundamentally who and what I am, and having thus discovered me, he enters into me without any intermediate condition. And even the man who is always engaged in action shall attain by my favor to the eternal and incorruptible abode, if he put his trust in me alone. And if, indulging self-confidence, thou sayest, "I will not fight," such a determination will prove itself vain, for the principles of thy nature will impel thee to engage. Being bound by all past karma to thy natural duties, thou, O son of Kunti, wilt involuntarily do, from necessity, that which in thy folly thou wouldest not do. There dwelleth in the heart of every creature, O Arjuna, the Master, Ishvara, who by his magic power causeth all things and creatures to revolve mounted upon the universal wheel of time. Take sanctuary with him alone, O son of Bharata, with all thy soul. By his grace thou shalt obtain supreme happiness, the eternal place. Wherever Krishna, the supreme master of devotion, and wherever the son of Prita, the mighty archer, may be, there with certainty are fortune, victory, wealth, and wise action. Each one is Krishna and Arjuna. Where these two are joined together, all nature makes obeisance. In closing this series of comments on the Bhagavad Gita, we need perhaps give no reminder that only the surface of the teachings contained in the ancient book is touched upon. The viewpoint taken out of the 7 different applications possible is that of the individual, in accordance with Mr. Judge's early comments. But even from that viewpoint, the field has been by no means fully covered. It is hoped, however, that enough has been said to afford at least a little more light to those who aspire to learn the science of devotion.